we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at some basic operations dealing with algebra. I shouldn't see any hands up right now. I only take hands when I ask for hands. If you have problems, guys, remember, put it in the chat or ask Yolanda or myself. Alrighty, so we're going to start off by sort of going some expressions, writing expressions for ourselves, understanding what's going on, and then we'll get to some basic operations. So this first question says there are 16 sweets in a bag. So my first question to you is, and I just want you to put your answers on the chat. I don't want to see any hands. How many sweets would I have in 2 bags? So if 16 sweets are in 1 bag, how many would I have in 2 bags? You just pop it on the chat for me. Okay, good, guys. So in 1 bag, I've got 16 sweets. If I now have 2 bags, I've got double that, 32. So we would have 32 sweets in 2 bags. I'm not splitting the 1 bag. I am doubling it. I'm getting a whole nother bag of 16 sweets. So try the second one for me. Put it in the chat for me. How many sweets would I have in 3 bags? Also, it would help if I could spell, hey, bags, not 3 bag. So how many would I have in 3 bags? Nice, guys. Good. Okay, so now we've got 3 bags, each of them 16 sweets in that, which basically means I'm tripling the amount of sweets that I have. And so I have 48 sweets. Okay, now that's all fine and good because I knew how many sweets I was working with. But remember, the whole point of algebra is that we have unknowns. So let's see what happens when we're dealing with an unknown situation. So this is quite similar to the question that I just asked you. So I'm going to do that. If we now have y sweets in the bag, so I'm using my variable, my letter to represent an unknown. I'm saying I've got y sweets in the bag. I don't know how many I have. I just know I have some sweets in the bag. So my question is, again, how many sweets are there in 2 bags? So what would my expression look like, or what would I need to do to figure out how many sweets I have in 2 bags? Well, we know that in question A, what we did, if we go back up to 1, what we did was we said the 16 sweets times 2. So it makes sense now, if I've got y sweets in 1 bag, I'm going to have another y sweets in 2 bags. And so essentially what we're doing here is we're saying 2 times y, or y times 2, whichever you want. And we know that that gives us an expression of 2y. Some of you are putting in the chat there, which is awesome. So this is now where our algebra comes in. We are writing or creating or working with expressions involving a level. So I see you guys are doing awesomely there. Can you give me an expression then for how many sweets there are in 3 bags? Remember, I've got y sweets in 1, and I have 3 bags. Excellent, guys. 3 times y, which gives me 3y sweets. I'm going to add a little question here. How many sweets would I have in half a bag? So what would my expression be for the number of sweets if I only had half a bag of sweets? I've added it on the side there, so tell me what you think. So I've only got, how many would I have in my bag? Good, guys, well done. So if I've got half a bag, we know that the number of sweets I would have is half y, or half times y. I would have half initially. Right, so this is again going back to towards the end of our last lesson on Monday, if you were with us, and that reading questions carefully is so, so important. And like, we all make silly mistakes, we all misread a question, but do double check your work as you go along, because you don't want to be making silly mistakes with the basics. Right, so I'm going to leave that there if you want to screenshot. I'm also going to open the floor to anyone who has questions. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand now. Otherwise, we're going to look at our next example. So this is the time for questions if you have any. Okay, your name says Mr. Lixa. I don't know if that's how you say it. If you just let me know what your name is and then ask your question.
Sorry, ma'am, could I please ask that how can I screenshot on a laptop?
So you either need to push the print screen button and copy that into like a Word, or you could just take a photo on your phone.
Yeah. The easy thing is take a picture using your phone, okay? And then when you have an adult, they can help you. Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. What's your name? Oh, damn it. Okay, it's fine. You can tell us your name on the chat so I can change it for you.
Okay, guys, I see there's a request to go slower. I will do my best, but we are just sort of recapping what we have done. So none of this is new yet. But yeah, just remember to keep asking questions. If I am going a bit fast, just let me know. But like I said, on Monday. It says there are all the videos on the website and on the app that you can go and rewatch for yourselves. Righty, I'm hoping we've all got screenshots. Let's have a look at our third example here. So essentially what I'm asking you to do here is understand what operation and what, see if I just make this a touch smaller, is from the last example, example 2, for example, if we look at A. We said that if there were 2 bags of sweets and each bag had Y sweets, we could multiply the 2 Y. So what you need to remember, anytime you see a coefficient, so a number in front of a variable, operation you are doing between the two is times n. Okay, maybe I should write my k better. So 4k means 4 times the value of whatever k is. That is the operation we are working with. And so what that means, saying 7 times the value of whatever j is. And so understanding these operations is going to be very important, because like I said on Monday, sometimes we ask you to substitute values in place of your variable. And if you don't know what operation you're working with, we have a bit of a problem. Okay, so 5p, if we think about multiplication, let's just take a little sidetrack here. If I said 3 times 2, this is essentially saying that I have got 3 groups of 2. So I've got a group of 2, a group of 2, and a group of 2. 6. That's what multiplication is. If you want to go back and rewatch, I think it was our whole number section or our integer section, we spoke about this idea of multiplication and what it means. So you can go and rewatch that there as well. 5p then, or 5x, or 5 whatever, means that we are working with 5 groups of p values. So we've got a p, a p, a p, a p, and a p. And all together, I have got 5 groups of p. Multiplication is. Alrighty, so excuse me. We once again need to understand this last one here, just so we finish all the blocks. It says 8 groups of x is we have 8 groups of x, what we can essentially do is we can times 8 and x, giving me 8x as my value. This is more for you to understand what the operations are that we're working with when we have a coefficient and a variable. And so when operations, hopefully that will make sense. Claudia said I'm glitching, so I'm going to turn my camera off to help, but we'll see in a second.
It could be the network. I know I'm on load shedding, so I can't even complain.
Okay, hopefully that'll help. We'll see how we go. All right, so guys, take a screenshot of this and then we're going to move on. I don't know if anyone has any questions, but all I want you to understand, if you want to sort of have a summary for yourself, is the fact that we can work with coefficients. So that number in front of my variable, remember, is your coefficient. And essentially what it multiplying the coefficient with the variable. It's sitting directly in front of the variable, nothing in between. This essentially means 4 times your variable, or your coefficient times your variable. All right, so again, take screenshots. Any questions? You can raise your hand now if you do have questions. Otherwise, we're going to move on. Oh, sorry. Alrighty. Oh gosh, sorry guys. Like really went all the way. Okay, so there's just some important things that we need to note of when we start talking about algebra. So I've made a little block here for us to fill this in. You do it however you want to do it. It's really up to you. But there are some important things to take note of. First things first is this idea that, like we've spoken about here, is that when we have a coefficient, the operation multiplication. So I'm going to rewrite what I've written there. You don't have to if you don't want to, but essentially this is implying for us a multiplication operation. Now again, the reason this is so important to understand is because if you substitute in a value, you need to know what operation you are performing. Right, the next thing that's very important for us to understand, and this is just like how to write answers down. When we work with multiple variables, and you'll see this in a second, we always want to try write our answers in alphabetical order. So basically what that means is, I'm going to give you an example. Basically what this means is if I had given you BAC, for example, and you had to write that in your answer, or you had to write that as a final expression, we always want to try and order this from A to B to C all the way to Z. Now, this is going to help you a lot when we start to talk about things like terms, which I'm going to mention now in a second, but we're going to talk about that more in our next lesson as well. Sorry, that should also say when we multiply variables. Right, the next thing that we need to be very careful of when we are working with algebra is that when we add or subtract, I'm just going to use plus or minus, we can only add like terms. So can someone put in the chat, or if you would like to raise your hand, could someone tell me what like terms are? What do I mean when I say like terms? Reese, what are like terms?
Ma'am, and it's plus or minus, ma'am. So when you when you can only plus and minus, plus or minus, ma'am.
Okay, and how do I identify like terms? So how do I know which terms I can add or subtract?
Ma'am, when it's like, how can I say it, ma'am?
You can give me an example if that's easier.
When it's plus 9 plus x, something like that, ma'am.
Okay, cool. So guys, when we're talking about adding or subtracting in expressions, Reese has given us an example there of 9 plus x. We need to be careful that we're only adding or subtracting our like terms, all right? Now, in order for us to identify our like terms, we are, and someone's put a nice definition there in the chat, like terms are ones that have the same variable. All right, so basically what that means is, if I had, for example, 2y plus 3x, that looks like a weird plus, let's just fix that, plus 3x, we need to be careful of the fact that these variables are different. One term has a y and my other term has an x. Because those variables are different, they are not like terms. So that means I can't add or subtract them together. However, if I had, for example, 3y, these are now the same variables, just get my colors right. And because they have the same variable, I can add or subtract them. And so I can simplify that expression further to give me an answer of 5y. So what we need to be very careful of, and again, we're going to chat about this more as more operations and more simplification. We need to be careful of how we write our answers. So like I've said, in alphabetical order, it's going to help us identify like terms as we go along. And we need to be careful of when we start to use the operations addition and subtraction, we need to be adding or subtracting like terms only. If we start just adding random things together, we're going to get very weird answers. It's not going to be right. And then we're going to end up confusing the whole situation. Right, so I'm just waiting here in case anyone wants to take a screenshot. I know I've caused some chaos with my own block here. Let's see if we can fix this a bit. All right. So this is just, if you know the stuff, that's awesome. Like I say, some of you will know it, some of you will still be learning this, but these are some really important things that we need to remember when we start doing algebra. Right, for everyone to take a screenshot. Where, hey guys, I know it's been quite a bit of information, and just remember, keep taking your notes, keep making sure that you're asking questions on the chat when you need to. If anyone has a question and would like to raise their hand, now is the time to raise your hand and ask me. Otherwise, we'll move on to our brain break. Right, so after our brain break, guys, we're going to practice some of this. We're going to practice some of the stuff. And so hopefully this will all start to make much more sense as we do more practice. So we're going to do quite a bit of practice on these ideas when simplifying with algebra. All right, here's your brain break for the day. So again, a little bit of practice with some fraction problem solving type of questions. Okay, so clearly I need to keep my camera off because I'm glitching again. Right, so the question is, Haley has balloons. A fifth of them are blue, 2/3 of them are red. What fraction of them are? Second, have a think. You know what fraction are blue, you know what fraction are red, want to know what fraction of them are green. And again, guys, if you are new, a brain break is basically just us taking a little break from what we're doing in the lesson. Sometimes it's like a brain teaser, sometimes it's a puzzle. There was a word problem, so this is what I'll bring. So I really do encourage you to give this one a try, because this is definitely a type of question we could ask you in an assessment. Now, guys, be careful. The question says what fraction of them are green. So your answer should be a fraction. Remember, ask questions in the chat if you're not 100% sure. Nice, Fiona. Fiona, that's a lovely answer. If you would like to raise your hand to explain how to do it, that would be amazing. All right, how do we do this?
Ma'am, I say 1/5 times 2/3, I'll get 2/15.
Sorry, can you say it again? You were a bit lagged.
Okay, I say 1/5 times 2/3, I get 2/15.
Okay. Okay, interesting. Okay, so essentially I would have gone about it a different way, and it's interesting that it gives you the same answer. So let's see if we can figure out why. We've got some balloons, right? This rectangle represents all of the balloons that I have, right? We know that a fifth of them, oh golly, Miss Molly, a fifth of them are blue. So there's a fifth. We know that 2/3 of them are red. And what we want to know is how many are green. That's the question. Now, I would have said, okay, if I think of this in terms of like percentages or parts of a whole, I know that 1 represents all of the balloons that I have. So I would have said 1 minus a fifth minus 2/3 in order to get how many green balloons I have. Because if I take away the blue and if I take away the red, all I'm left with is the green. So that means I'm just going to go down here. That therefore means that I have got to find an LCD. So I would have 15/15 minus 3/15 minus 10/15. If you don't know where I'm getting those from, remember LCD will make all of our denominators the same. So 1 is over 1. I'd have to times that by 15. So I'd do the same thing to the numerator. I'd have to times the 5 by 3. So I'd do the same thing in the numerator. And I'd have to times the 3 by 5. So I times the same thing in the numerator.
Well done, guys.
Once I've got that, I would go and subtract all of them. So 15 minus 3 is 12. 12 minus 10 is 2/15. I'm intrigued why this gives us the same answer. I don't know if it's just because the numbers worked out like that.
Yeah, Fiona got it right though.
Okay, guys, so that's essentially how you deal with these sorts of questions. And again, you need to read questions carefully, especially in these beginning sections of maths when we talk about whole numbers and integers and fractions and ratio and rate and all of that stuff. Often the questions are quite wordy, and so if we're not reading them properly, we're going to make silly mistakes. Right, so what I will do is I'll just do, oh gosh, that in case you want to take a screenshot of that brain break, because like I say, it definitely is a type of question we'd ask you in a assessment setting. And then we're going to move on. Alrighty, so let's keep practicing our algebra here. Sorry, guys. Right, so we've spoken about multiplication and we've spoken about how we can write expressions when we start to multiply, but we also need to understand how division works with algebra. So let's read our first question here. And again, it's going to link with question 2, so we'll leave it up together. It says that there are, maybe I should move this out of my way. It says that there are 12 Skittles in a bag.
Yeah. Now we are good to go. Sorry, it's because you're glitching, and then I can see that someone else find you glitching. But I think we can hear and understand. Hey, my people, it's just now and then, and or someone load shedding. So it could be that it's my load shedding. Sorry, you can continue to just them.
Okay. Alrighty, guys. Just remember, if you do find that there's issues, just go and rewatch the recording. Okay. Right, so we've got 12 Skittles in a bag. If the Skittles are shared equally between 3 children, now be careful here. I haven't asked for an answer. I've asked to write an expression for the number of Skittles that each child gets. So in the chat, I want to know, how would you work out, so what method would you use to figure out how many Skittles each of those children get? We're not using variables just yet. All right, nice Mavuyo, nice Obonga. Right, exactly, guys. If I've got 12 Skittles in a bag and I need to share that between 3 children equally, my expression to do so would be 12 divided by 3. So that is the expression that I'm writing. That therefore means that each child gets 4 Skittles. Alrighty, so when we're writing expressions, remember, we're not trying to find an answer. We're just trying to write down essentially the method that we use. So let's now have a look at what happens when we start dealing with variables. Now, again, there's going to be some things that I'm going to point out, but we'll do that in a second. Okay, guys, so there are now X Skittles in a bag. So I don't know how many Skittles I have. I just have X Skittles. I want to know, what expression would I write down if I wanted to share these Skittles equally between 2 children? So what would it look like if I shared those Skittles between 2 children? What would my expression look like? Remember, I'm sharing them. Okay, guys, so I think some of us aren't listening because, like I said, we're doing division at the moment. But let's have a look here. If we look at this as a picture, in my bag, I've got X Skittles. Now, what I want to do is I need to give part of this bag to one child and part of this bag to another child. They are my children, which means that I need to split this bag in half to give half the bag to one child and half the bag to the other child, which means that if I'm now going to write an expression to represent how I'm going to split it, I need to take the X Skittles in my main bag and I need to divide it between the 2 children. I need to share it between the 2 children. Now, there are many different ways that we can write the division, just so that we all understand. We can write it with a division sign. We could write this as a fraction, so we could say half of X, or we could write this as X over 2. All of those things mean exactly the same thing. They are all saying to me that I am taking my bag of Skittles and I am dividing it between 2 children. Right, so I want you to try for me what your expression would look like when you're now dividing the bag between 3 children. So what would I write down as my expression for the bag being divided between 3 children? I'm almost giving it away here.
Let's go, my people. We can do this.
Nice, guys. Okay, so remember, I'm taking my bag of Skittles. There's my bag of Skittles. It's got X Skittles in it. I now have 3 kids that I need to divide it between. So that's a weird looking child, isn't it? Right, it didn't get any better. We've now got 3 children that we need to divide this bag up into. And so that therefore means I need to split this bag equally into 3. And so like a lot of you are saying there, we would take X and we would divide it by 3 children. All right, so again, grade 8s, you need to be able to take information in like a sentence like this and be able to write an algebraic expression. We need to take words and put it into maths, essentially. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop there in case anyone wants to take a screenshot. Now is your time to do that. Now is also your time to raise your hand if you have any questions for me.
Okay, my people, it's time for you to shine. Raise your hand. If you got this wrong, raise your hand so you can explain to Teacher Sam why did you get it wrong. So you will understand how did you get it right. Okay. Anyone brave? We love brave people. Do we all understand? We can also vote on the chat. Please show it with hands up, hands down, or I mean thumbs up, thumbs down on the chat. Let's vote, my people. Let's vote.
Okay, guys, there's a lot of you saying 3 times X on the chat. It is not times. So please, if you don't understand why it is not times, you need to say so, or you need to ask your question because it is not times. Right, Lingomoso, I don't think that's how you say your name. Please say it for me so I can say it properly. No. Ligomso? Oh, I don't know. You keep raising your hand and then you keep lowering it. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, I also noticed that. But you can also put your question on the chat, eh? We can move on. So I see we have very little time, unless if just you are ready to. We have more work, or
no, we've got a little bit more.
okay.
So we've sort of done. Whoopsie, guys. We've done the basics of. I'm just skipping that because it's boring. We've done the basics of what division and multiplication is. So now I want to practice this with you guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do C and E with you, and then you're going to try D and F by yourselves. So let's try C first, and then we'll go from there. Now, if you joined us for the earlier videos, when we started talking about integers and whole numbers, one of the sort of things that I gave you to help was SNV. And now that we're doing algebra, this is even more important. So just a reminder, SNV stands for signs, numbers, and then variables. And basically what this is if you do your multiplication and your division in this order, so you deal with the signs first, then you deal with the numbers, then you deal with the variables, you will get, or you should get, your multiplication and division correct every time. So if we go and have a look at question C, let's start with the signs. All of these signs here are positive. So if I'm only multiplying positives, that means that my answer can only be positive. So my answer is going to be positive I obviously don't write the positive there, but it's important to know that my answer is positive. So I've done the signs. I'm now going to do the numbers. Now, guys, what you need to remember is that in front of any variable, if we've just got a variable sitting by itself, we do actually have a coefficient of 1. So this P has a coefficient of 1, this Q has a coefficient of 1, and the R has a coefficient of 1. And so when I go and deal with my numbers, I'm saying 4 times 1 times 1 times 1. I'm just going to write that down for you. So when it gets to my numbers, I multiply all of the coefficients together. Now we know that 4 times 1 times 1 times 1 is just 4. So I've dealt with my numbers. And then finally, I deal with my variables. Now this will become a lot more important once we've spoken about exponents. But remember, variables, we can't really change anything unless the variables are the same. Oh, excuse me. So when I've got P times Q times R, because all of those variables are different, I can't do anything with them. That's just P, Q, R. But what I do need to make sure that I do is I write it down in alphabetical order. Now, luckily in this case, I gave it to you in alphabetical order. And so this would just be 4 P, Q, R. And so by multiplying all of my values together here, I've got my final simplified product of 4 P, Q, R. So signs, numbers, variables, very useful. It helps us multiply and divide correctly. And make sure that when you are working with those variables, again, write it down in alphabetical order. Okay, if we move on to E, you're going to try the other two by yourself in a second. Let's again do signs, numbers, variables. So this is a positive 15 divided by a positive 3. A positive divided by a positive, we know is a positive. So I don't need to do anything there. I don't have to write the positive down, just know that it is positive. So now when I get to my numbers, the only thing I actually want to look at is this 15 divided by 3, or you can say 15 over 3. It doesn't really matter. It's division either way. You want to see, can you simplify that? So we know that if I say 15 divided by 3, I get 5. So I can simplify my number down to 5. Then I deal with my variables. Now, unfortunately, shame, the only variable I have here is this little x all by itself. And so because there isn't anything I can do with the x, it just becomes 5x. And so my final simplified answer here is 5x. Now, when we spoke about fractions, I showed you another way that you could deal with fractions, and that is through cross-canceling. So what we could do, I'm just going to do a little purple block here. What we could do is say 15x over 3, and we can cross-cancel what can simplify. So I know 3 divides into 15 5 times, and 3 divides into itself once. And so essentially what we have here is 5x all over 1. Now 5x over 1 is just 5x. So any way that you choose to do this, you will get the correct answer. It's really up to you what you're more comfortable with. But we simplify that down to 5x. Okay, so I'm going to leave that up there. I'm going to give you 3 or 4 minutes. I want you guys to try and do for me D and F. Remember, if you're feeling confused, if you're feeling unsure, please put your questions in the chat. I am going to just, while everyone's trying these 2 questions, if you have any questions, please raise your hand now and ask. Otherwise, like everyone's doing in the chat there, Blessing, Loazi, Sehofatso, when you put your answers in the chat, please make sure you number them so that we know which is which. So again, if you have any questions, please raise your hand now so that I can help you. Okay, I'm assuming because there's no hands, there's no questions. So I'm just going to keep an eye on the chat as your answers come through. I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. You guys are doing really nicely. Remember, guys, we are multiplying. So just be careful when you multiply your numbers, make sure you are actually getting a product. Right, if anyone wants to raise their hand to explain how they got D or F, now's the time. Blessed, I see your hand. Do you want to explain D for me?
Yes, ma'am. I said 2 times 3 equals 6, and then I put A, ma'am.
Perfect. So guys, if we do the numbers, well, if we do the signs first, everything's positive, so it's positive. Numbers, 2 times 3 is 6. And then I've just got that variable A. So my answer here is 6A. Right, very nice. Ayawale, do you want to help me with F?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am, I did.
Ayawale, you're a bit far away from your speaker. Can you try get a bit closer to your speaker?
Yes, ma'am.
Just because I can't. There we go.
And can you hear me?
Yes.
Ma'am, I said 25 divided by 5 equals 5.
Okay.
I added the two variables. 5.
Okay. Good. Right. So guys, your final answer here is 5xy. Now I just want to quickly explain why that is the case. Now remember, according to BODMAS, multiplication and division do have sort of a similar level of importance. So if I just go left to right, what I have is 25 times xy, which is 25xy. And then I have my division by 5. So I could write this as a fraction, very much like what we had in E. And then I can apply the same steps. I can cross cancel, or I can simplify this fraction. 5 divides into 5 once, and in English into 25 5 times. And so what I'm left with is 5xy over 1, or 5xy. And so what you just need to be careful of is, even when sometimes these questions look a little bit tricky, they don't look so nice, try and put it in a format that makes a little bit more sense to you, i.e. like a fraction. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that there for you in case you want to take a screenshot.